بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear OCIF community and beyond, thank you for joining us today. Today we are with a very, very special guest, Dr. Ihsan Bagby. I'm very, very excited to be with him. This is the first time I have an opportunity to converse with him, but I've heard, mashallah, so much about him. Dr. Ihsan accepted Islam in 1969. And mashallah, he has a lot going on in his life, doing a lot for the Muslim community. He is part of the Fiqh Council of North America, as well as he works with CARE, with ISNA, with his local masjid. He is a visiting professor at Bayan, Claremont Graduate School, which I graduated from a few years ago, as well as a faculty member of the Islamic Seminary of America, the project of Dr. Yasir Qadhi, among others. Professor Dr. Ihsan is also a professor at the University of Kentucky. Professor, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day, especially during Ramadan. Jazakumullah khair. We're very, very excited to be with you and very excited to learn from you. Now, as far as I'm aware, you are the leading expert when it comes to Masajid in America. I've seen some of your projects, some of your research. And we really want to kind of engage you on this topic. OCIF has currently launched a strategic plan that we've been working on for a while, and we want your advice when it comes to community. And a lot of community members will be joining us, as well as some of the board members. So our ears are open. We're looking very forward to learning from you. And with that, let's get into kind of the first major question. The title of this program is Muslims in America and the Masjid. So let's start with a very broad question. What is the role of a masjid in America?
So, Bismillah ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. I want to thank Imam Tariq first for inviting me. Anytime I can talk about Masajid in America, I'm more than willing to join in. And I used to live in Southern California and Orange County, so I kind of have a close feeling in my heart for Orange County, and I really hope the best for Orange County Islamic Institute, inshallah, and its future, for its future. And so the question of the role of the masjid in general, but in particular the masjid in America, I think the best way to approach it is to think of the masjid of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Medina, what I would call the Prophetic Masjid. And I think that masjid is going to be very similar to our masjid, as opposed to the way many, if not most, masjids in the Muslim world are and how they function, how they're organized. And what you automatically understand is that the Prophetic Masjid was a community. It was a center for a community. It was the place where Muslims gathered. And I think of it as this nexus, this center where Muslims gather to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to connect to one another. Those are the two main functions. And therefore, the role of the masjid is to bring Muslims together. And I would say the first purpose is to enhance faith, to increase knowledge, to improve character. So the individual. So we come together, and the first function, the first role of the masjid is to improve who we are as servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And secondarily, it is to unite us, to together, to bring our hearts together, to have a solid sense of being one structure. As our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, tara al-mu'minina fi tarahumihim wa tawaddihim wa ta'atufihim kamathal al-jasad," and it keeps on. But here's the image, here's the ideal, and it was the ideal of the prophetic masjid, and that is, as our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you see the believers in their mutual ta'atufihim, tarahumihim, their compassion for one another, their love for one another, and their sympathy for one another, like a body, like one body. And that is what we are to be, one body. Very different in terms of the parts of the body. And mashallah, our community here in America is as diverse as any place on the Muslim world outside of Hajj and outside of Umrah and, the gathering there in the holy sites. But we aren't, the ideal is for us to come together, to be community. And then thirdly, the purpose, the role is we have to be mission oriented. In other words, we come together to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We come together to improve ourselves. We come together to form a true brotherhood and sisterhood so that we can get to work. Because if you walked into the masjid of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's not like, you can just hang out, just like, you can just be a pass through, come in, go out. No. When you walked into that masjid, you were part of a mission. You were part of activities to establish the deen in this world. And that's what we have to have a sense of, being mission oriented, and we can talk more about what that mission is. But that's what our masjid should be, a place where we come together to worship. The masjid should not simply be in our minds a place of prayer. Of course, it is first a place of prayer. But if people think that's the only function, then they've missed so much of what a masjid is supposed to be. They're misunderstanding the prophetic masjid, which is our ideal. A masjid should be a community center. I do studies, and Imam Tariq mentioned, that's professionally, that's what I do. I do research on masjids. And early on, I did a survey of a few masjids, and I asked the question to masjid participants on a questionnaire, what is your sense, or how do you view the masjid? And there are some choices. Is it a place of prayer? Is it a community center where prayer also takes place? And I was really surprised that half of the people said it was a place of prayer and not a community center where also prayer is held. And that showed me that there is a misunderstanding in a lot of people's minds. Their sense of what is this masjid. This masjid is not a building. It's not just a location, a space where you can fulfill your obligations. This masjid is actually a community of people. And I'll stop there.
Jazakallah khair, Professor. So, a masjid is a community of people. I keep hearing community, community, community. And, I grew up in Chicago, and the community there are quite broad. They're quite large. And they are, however, very segregated, just kind of following the structure of Chicago and the society there. Chicago is a very segregated city, even outside of the Muslim community. When I came here to Southern California, I saw something a little bit different. There's a lot more integration. And, to me, that is an opportunity. That is a huge opportunity that people from different cultures, different backgrounds, with different skills can come together and build this masjid. So my second question to you, and based on your research, what you've experienced in terms of masajid in America, how important is the participation of community members in regards to the role of the masjid?
The participation is absolutely essential. Again, if we are to realize the ideal of the Prophetic Masjid, which is the ideal of Islam, then we need to maximize participation. The idea that you just come and make Salatul Jummah, or you come every now and then to make prayer, is not the ideal. That is not really a community. The fact that so many people come to the masjid, but they don't know anybody. They pray next to somebody and they don't know their name. And even if they know their name, do they really know their background, their story, their narrative? So participation and, regularly coming to the masjid for salah and activities is something that really Allah is asking us to do. And if you lived in the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that would be expected of you. I remember a little athar of a Sahabi when he was old, and he said in the report, he's around a bunch of younger people who are tabi'een, they never experienced the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they were talking about, I wish I was there, and and he said, you shouldn't really do that, because a lot was expected of people, and there were a lot of trials. You had to step up, and that is what it means to be a Muslim today in America. We have to step up to participate, and that means we cannot just take our masjid casually as a place to fulfill your individual obligation. That is a mistake, and it does not bode well for the future of our masjid and our Muslim community if a large number of people take that attitude.
It's kind of following up on that, Professor. What is the difference in your experience between masajid that has a lot of volunteers, a lot of people committed to the project of the masjid, versus masajid that, you don't find as much? People are more reluctant to participate in the basic volunteering things. And how does that affect the masjid on both ends here?
Well, I think it starts with the message that they get when they come to the masjid, whether for salah or conversation or the khutbah. Is this a masjid that has no expectations of you, no understanding of what it means to be a Muslim, no sense of mission? So that's one aspect, that they need to get a message that they need to be involved, that this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects of you, that you become involved. Because Islam is not something for the four walls of the masjid. It's for the world. It is to be a light of the world. So there needs to be a message that I would hope instills some excitement, some vision of where this masjid is going. So they have to at least deal with the question, am I going to treat this place simply as a place where I'm going to fulfill my fara'id of making salah, or is it a place that is inviting me to become more involved in this mission of Islam? And, I did a study of with ISPU, a wonderful Muslim think tank. I think it's the best Muslim think tank in America. And we did a research on masjids and their relationship with young adults, converts, and women. Basically, groups that have experienced or demonstrated some alienation from the masjid. And so the study was trying to figure out, what's going on, and also what can masjids do? And one of the key things that came out in the survey was that what young people in particular and converts want in particular are inspiring and relevant khutbahs that are addressing the issues of today. And that builds some excitement and hopefully will increase participation. Their point of view is that, just the kind of the old style khutbah, if I could say that, just basic information is not appealing, right? So inspired and relevant khutbahs. And the other thing that was remarked, that when they can find some activity that attracts them, then that cements their relationship with the masjid. And in fact, one of our problems is that our masjids are fairly large. When I became Muslim, Juma was 10 people. And probably in Orange County, you'll find people that will talk about, Juma in somebody's garage, and 10 and 5 people. And, for a few decades, our masjids were relatively small and you could develop relations. But now our masjids, alhamdulillah, are a lot larger, but people can come to a masjid and nobody will say anything to them. I must say, when I first went to Orange County, I would go regularly to the masjid, Fajr and Isha. And I would say it took, about some weeks before anybody said anything to me. Nobody said anything to me. And that's pretty typical. So one thing is, how do you get involved? And one answer is for masjids to try to offer different ways they can get involved. I must say, Christian churches, especially the large mega churches, have this issue, and their solution is what they call small groups, right? There's all kind of literature about small groups, right? And it's a way for somebody who comes in to a relatively big crowd, a person who does not know the vast majority of anybody there, let alone knowing their name, let alone knowing anything about different people, but giving them a chance to participate in a smaller group. And through that smaller group, they develop relations with individuals, with other individuals. And that builds a sense of belonging. Because if you're going to have participation You have to be able to, engender a sense of belonging in people. And small groups is one. So in our research, somebody talked about a book club that was so inspiring. Somebody talked about the group that of sisters that just prepared the meal for a regular event that they would have, that they prepared the meal. So, and then somebody talked about a hiking club that they had. And then somebody talked about a group of young mothers, right? So, and it's not that the masjid has to control, direct these small groups. They need to find a champion, and they need to basically facilitate in any way that the masjid can in terms of allowing them to come together and to function. That's some of my thoughts on your question.
Jazakallah khair, Professor. So you touched on this and these two questions just now, but I want to kind of reframe it to where it's a little bit more specific about the contemporary climate of Masajid and Muslims in America. And that is, for a community member, how should they participate? And for the administration, how do they achieve greater participation? Now, you touched on this just now, but to kind of just make it a little bit more specific, what are your findings when it comes to like the now of America, the post-Trump era, the era of the depression pandemic or endemic, this mass shootings that are skyrocketing across the nation? Why is it important for the Muslim, especially these groups which are often alienated, like the young adult group? Why should it be important for them to attend the masjid, and what should the administration of Masajid be doing now in light of these major challenges?
Yeah, well, if you ask the question of what to do about young adults, the biggest thing that the masjid can do is to be a welcoming masjid. And almost all masjids are not welcoming. And being welcoming is like an open door to participation, going beyond just coming for Jummah. But I must say to begin that what is it that participants should do? Well, they should go to the masjid for a salah. That's what they should do. That is kind of the beginning point. That is the foundation for community, is regular salah. And a person should try to go to the masjid at least once a day, and more actually. But salah is the beginning point, as our Prophet Muhammad said. Salah in the masjid is so much more blessed, 27 times more blessing than praying at home. So that is the incentive to come to community to pray. But when somebody comes, one of the biggest complaints of young adults and women was the fact that they did not feel welcomed at the masjid. There's nobody there to welcome them, to say assalamu alaikum, to answer questions about where they need to go, to make wudu or so. There's no sense that they get that they are a person who is welcomed in this community. Very few masjids, do a good job in accomplishing that. And so one of the things that we recommended is what we call a Tasleem Squad, which is a group of people that will be at the door to welcome people into the masjid. and also talk with them after Salah or after Salatul Jummah to get to know them, and also to offer a segue into possible activities that people might get involved in. And then instilling in the whole community, because there is a committee that focuses on these issues. But again, the message has to come from the minbar and leadership that everybody should be welcoming. And in so many masjids, we got the Haram Squad, we got the Tasleem Squad, very few, and very few Tasleem Squads in masjids, but we got the Haram Squad in a lot more masjids, and that's those people who feel they have the obligation to pounce on people when they see something that is not exactly according to Sunnah or their understanding of Sunnah. And so you have to get the message across and a culture, building up a culture that everybody should be welcoming. So, for instance, when I came to that masjid and moved to Southern California, went to the masjid close to me, and nobody talked to me. I mean, nobody felt that they had a responsibility, or they felt it was part of their Islam to greet this stranger. And that is that type of culture has to be engendered in masjids, so that they feel welcomed. Inshallah, I'll leave it there and maybe come to a few more points, some of your other questions.
Jazakumullah khair. For those who are just joining us, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Am I getting at what you were asking?
Oh, definitely, for sure, Professor, for sure.
Okay.
Jazakumullah khair. Really, a lot of good points for me personally as well. So inshallah, I'll be sure to start applying them after this session, bid'Illahi ta'ala. For those who are just joining us, we are with the esteemed and respected Dr. Ihsan Bagby, who is the leading expert, although he kind of humbly tries to say no, there are other people, but inshallah, the leading expert of Masajid in America. We're discussing the masjid in America, and the Muslim American communities, and how we can really progress forward, work forward, some of the good elements of a good masjid, some of the harmful ones, and that's where I kind of want to go next. You mentioned the importance of being a welcoming masjid, the harms of a haram squad, setting up small groups and whatnot. Is there anything else you can add to that in terms of what are some of the common mistakes, aside from what you just mentioned, common mistakes that harm community growth, or common practices that you've seen across the country that actually engender a stronger community?
Well, we've been talking about the sense that a masjid needs to be a community, and that means a sense that people feel that they belong. They're welcomed and they are included. And I did a study of 2 masjids not so long ago. They invited me and ISPU in to do a kind of a deep dive into their community and see how we could improve it. And so we did a questionnaire of the masjid participants. And we asked them a lot of questions of ranking the various aspects of the masjid. And so some of the questions were about whether they feel that their opinion and voice is heard, whether they are welcome to kind of be included in the decision making of the masjid. Do they feel that the leadership of the masjid is being transparent and is being inclusive? Questions like that. And these 2 masjids that we studied had a very dynamic leadership. And so they felt, that aspect of our masjid is not an issue because we are transparent. Everybody knows that, they matter in our community, and everybody's welcome to participate in kind of the leadership. And so when the results came back, all of those aspects were at the bottom. They had the worst scores. So in the minds of the leadership, they were open, but the people that attended the masjid felt that it was closed. And how do you develop a sense of belonging in that environment? So obviously, too many people were cynical, were negative about really belonging to this masjid and really giving of myself to this masjid, because they thought the leadership was disconnected. And so some of our suggestions was this Tasleem Squad. And so in one masjid, the president and the leadership started greeting people when they came in for Salatul Jummah. They started posting minutes. They started making more thorough announcements after Jummah about what's going on in the masjid. They started holding community gatherings where they would discuss issues. And, you know, we went back about a year and a half later, and we did the exact same questionnaire to see if there was any improvement. And mashallah, in this one particular masjid, the scores about people feeling that, you know, their voice was being heard and it was, they felt included, went way up, not to the top, but improved mightily. And the president himself thought it was his just being there and interacting with people, which just gave people a sense that, hey, the president cares and the president's listening to me, you know. So a very simple thing like that engendered great improvement. And so to me, that's one of the mistakes of masjids is basically communication and improving the personal relationship between leadership and people that attend the masjid.
Jazakallah khair, Professor. So kind of moving forward here, you know, I deal a lot with the youth. I love my youth. We've been working together. I've been working with them for the past 3 years. They've grown so much, and the OCIF community is very, very proud of them. And now that they're getting into college, some of these youth who've been with us for several years now they're kind of taking on leadership roles in the masjid. And this brings about a lot of discussions. You know, when I listen to their experiences in high school and college, the conversations that are going on, you know, I'm not that much older than them. You know, I'm only 15 years older than them. Yet it seems like a completely different America, a completely different environment. Things that would never be mentioned, that would even taboo, shameful to mention when I was younger, when I was in high school, is now kind of front and center. And what I'm finding is that in my discussion with other imams in this locality, you know, how do we go forward? I mean, to what extent do we cling on to traditional beliefs, traditional positions, and kind of try and go against the tides, versus do we ride the wave, not in a sense where we start shedding our principles and replacing them with that which is un-Islamic, but you know, this is a really big concern for us, a really big topic. And you know, it affects this relationship between the young adults and the Masajid leadership. And now you have this rise of third spaces, which, you know, I don't have anything against third spaces, but what is a third space really, except that, you know, a group of Muslims who just, they abandoned or they no longer want to participate in the masjid, sometimes for reasons, you know, that the masjid was unwelcoming, it doesn't fulfill their needs, or sometimes it's for, you know, cultural reasons. And so the question I have for you is, what are some of your major concerns about Masajid in America today?
Well, concerns when it comes to our youth and young adults is probably the question that should be on our minds today, because let's face it, that my generation, which is the generation of those who establish masjids for the most part, are aging. I'm got all white hair now. And just recently I came to accept, okay, I'm old. It took me a long, long time, I tell you, but finally I've accepted I'm old. And we're actually starting a transition period from kind of the pioneers, from those who establish our masjids, which are either first generation converts, as myself, or first generation immigrants, right? And now their children and their children's children, so the second and third generation, are now coming of age, and now they are taking over. And the question is, will they take over, or will a large percentage of them disassociate from the masjid? And let's be very clear that the masjid will wither, inshallah, maybe not die, but it will wither if our young adults are not involved. If they choose to disassociate from the masjid, our Muslim community is going to be in trouble. After all, let's remember that the first Muslims that came were enslaved African Muslims who came. And so many of them were staunch Muslims, right? And they continued to practice. But by the third generation of those African Muslims, Islam basically disappeared. Then there was another wave of Muslims, immigrants, who came to this country in the turn of the 1900s, right? The 20th century. And by their third generation, so by the 40s and the 50s, that whole community withered. And spots of them were there, like in Chicago, but the majority of them kind of disappeared, right? So a community is in danger when you have the transition to a new generation. And that's what's starting to take place. And of course, after that, there's going to be another generation. After that, another generation. And let me say that our masjids are doing well, actually. You know, I rub shoulders with other researchers who are studying churches and synagogues and cathedrals and things like that. And I'm the envy of the crowd because our masjids are full of people. Our youth programs are active, right? We're just a recent study, Gallup study, which showed that the great decrease in people that are truly members of a particular church or synagogue, which is basically, a sign of participation, right? And many of my researchers also, they look at me and smile and say, oh, just wait a few generations. You'll be in the same boat as we are. And that's our challenge. Our challenge is to not be in the same boat with the Christian churches and the Jewish synagogues who are losing their young adults, right? And their participation and attendance is going down. So we have to understand that our masjids, to a great extent, are not just for us first generation converts and first generation immigrants, but for subsequent generations. Our masjids are for them, right? Because they are the ones who are to take over. And so, but I'm also a deep believer in this faith as found in Quran and Sunnah. So we can't, I mean, that's why I became Muslim. I didn't become Muslim to kind of bring some new way of thinking into Islam from America. That's part of popular American culture, you know. Popular American culture is dangerous because it does not lead down the path towards goodness, let alone towards Islam. And therefore, we can't compromise with our deen, but at the same time, we have to present our deen in their language. And we have to be non-judgmental in the sense that we're not asking you to come in so we can put you down, right? So there does have to be dialogue. There has to be safe spaces where people can dialogue. And it seems, you know, you've obviously mentioned that this is going on, and that is good. And that is good. I would say that the way to deepen participation is to also to deepen their commitment is to get them involved in things, not just educational activities. They need to get into the poor sections of town. They need to participate in environmental projects. They need to participate in political action projects. They need to participate in the fight against systematic racism in this country. The masjid has to be relevant, and that's relevant means engaged in the issues that face society. And the Islamic history, the fact that Islam has appealed to so many Americans, in particular African Americans, is because Islam has at its core a message of social justice, at its core a call for Muslims to stand up for justice. And this has inspired African Americans in particular, but Americans in general. This combination of spirituality and social justice. Work on yourself, work on the world. Better yourself and better this world. And I think getting young adults involved in things like that are important. But it's going to be messy. Imam Tariq, I don't know, it's going to be messy. But you can't give up our beliefs, but at the same time, and you have to engage in conversation and have a sense of safe space where people can involve. And, you know, third spaces are becoming more numerous, and they're good in a sense that at least it gives them a platform to discuss issues as Muslims. But these third spaces need to be connected to masjids. One of my research colleagues who is Jewish, and everybody's, by the way, everybody's concerned about young adults, everybody. And so my Jewish colleague did a very thorough study of young adults who are not coming to the synagogue, and that's almost all of them. And anyway, he told me in a casual conversation, he said that if that young adult has had no connection to the masjid or to the synagogue, that you can forget about it. There's very little likelihood that you'll be able to open their heart to, you know, the religion and to increase their commitment to Allah, to God, right? And to practice. So third spaces are good in a sense, but we need to work to make sure they're, connected to the masjid. And one third space that we studied, which was in DC, called Make Space, very good third space group. But what we found out is that they attend Salatul Jummah at the masjid, at different masjids, right? And they come together for their make space activities. But that is the very least, that they keep a connection with the masjid. Losing that connection to the masjid is a very dangerous path and does not bode well for us.
Just kind of building off that, Professor, I was listening to a local imam friend and his research about kind of some of the adolescent patterns that we're finding in Muslims in America. And one of the things that he found was that what happens often with parents is that they are practicing family, but they don't realize that some of their encouragements for their children actually instills within them that Islam is kind of secondary. And this includes stuff like when they go to college, don't attend the MSA, just focus on studying now. Right? Don't attend the MSA, just focus on studying. Or when they're in high school, they kind of, or it's finals time, okay, so 100% focus on studying. Don't go to Jummah prayer this week. It's okay, go to next week and whatnot. Now, again, these are practicing families who want their children to follow Islam and stay connected to Masajid. But what I heard from this individual was that actually instills within them this kind of mentality, this perception that Islam it's kind of on the side, and there are things more important than that. And the parents don't realize this is happening, but it is happening. So kind of tying this research with perhaps your experiences and how that affects community growth. Right? Part of community growth is no doubt on the shoulders of the masjid and the imam and the administration of the masjid, but at the same time, it's not all, they don't have all the pieces of that puzzle. Parents have a role to play there. So can you advise us in regards to that?
Well, the role of the masjid is to try to instill an understanding in parents of how best to be good Muslim parents. And obviously, if they are to give a sense to their children that Islam takes a back seat to, kind of the materialistic aspects of life, of college and whatever, job and whatever, then obviously that's a wrong message and will not, lead to young adults who are active Muslims. So again, from the minbar and conversations and reaching out to people, how to get this message across, again, to be able to get in somebody's home to talk to parents. But we have to get this across to parents that if you expect your children to be good Muslims, then Islam cannot take a back seat to life. And of course, we have so many good examples of how you can put Islam up front, right? And at the same time, do well in this world. Islam does not ask us to forego this world. In fact, Islam asks us to strive in this world, to seek the bounty of this world. But at the same time, we put Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first, always. So Islam has this wonderful balance between pursuit of career goals and pursuit of a career of devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to Islam. So that is a problem. That is a problem. Recognizing you only have young adults or youth for a short period of time, it is the parents' And maybe that's an aspect we're really not focusing on enough. I don't think in my own research I've tried to delve into that, but that is, an obvious aspect of a formula of success, of making sure parents are involved and parents understand. And, just thinking of this whole issue of parents, so often parents speak a different language than what the youth are used to. And again, that's why the masjid needs to facilitate the message of Islam in the kind of the language of the youth and the young adults. That means both language, arguments, and faces too. So one of the issues in my research, a young adult, they would say things like, I come into a masjid and all the leadership is in the hands of the uncles, and well, where are the young adults? And masjids that do well have visible young adults, young adults on the minbar, young adults in leadership positions, young adults out front. When they can see somebody like them, then that gives them a confidence that they can belong and that they are welcomed. I hope I touched upon the points you mentioned in your question.
Yes, Dr. Jazakumullah khair. We're kind of coming to a quick end here, 10 more minutes. I just want to apologize to the viewers. I accidentally put the settings on YouTube to kids mode, and it's not allowing comments. I tried to fix that, so my sincere apologies. It was meant to leave some. I did intend to leave some time for Q&A, but that locked that prevented that possibility. So I do apologize to the viewers. It's two very quick questions, Professor. First, alhamdulillah, the OCIF community has a very, very vibrant presence of women. There have always been women on the board, and there is a women's committee, a very active women's committee, and they've done a lot of good work for the community. Maybe a few words of encouragement to these women, and my sincere thanks to them. Why is it so important that women have a place in the masjid and participate in the masjid, specifically the American Masajid?
Mm-hmm. Well, here, listen to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as he talks to the Muslims. وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. This is in Surah Tawbah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the believing men and the believing women are awliya to one another. Awliya, meaning that they are patrons, they are supporters, they are those who assist, they are those who have your back. They are those who are there for you, right? And that's another wonderful image of community, right? That everybody is looking after one another, but it says men and women. So women are involved. And in fact, the rest of the verse kind of gives the functions of a Muslim and what you should be involved in, right? يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ, that they command the good and forbid the evil. In other words, they are out in the community, with the voice of justice, right? The voice of righteousness. And yuqimuna salah wa yu'tuna zakah, and they establish salah and establish zakah. So women have to be intricately involved in the mission of the masjid. And Imam Tariq, is so good to hear that your masjid is doing well, because so many masjids in America are not doing very well. I've just finished the 2020 comprehensive mosque study. Hopefully the report will be ready, inshallah, in the next few weeks. Look for it on ISPU, ISNA, Triple IT, the websites. Inshallah, it should be available. We'll have a big press conference. One of the questions is about women's on mosque governance boards and improvement, right? Very good. But when it comes to women praying in the musalla, there's been no movement since I first asked this question, 20 years ago. 2/3 of masjids do not allow women to pray in the same musalla, or more specifically, do not give a choice to women whether they want to pray in the same musalla with the men, of course, in rows behind the men, or in a separate area. And by the way, this is the Fiqh Council of North America's position that masjids, in following the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, must offer women that option to pray in the same musalla. If women do not feel comfortable, then yes, the masjid should also allow them to pray out in another room. But this is one of the points of irritation, especially for young adult Muslim women. This is an issue that the American Muslim community is still struggling with, and I applaud, say takbir, to the Orange County Islamic Institute for what they've done, and pray that they will continue to work to integrate women into their leadership structure and activities and in the musalla.
Jazakumullah khair, Professor. Just the last and final question here. According to your expertise, what do you hope to see more from American Masajid? This can be directed to me as the Imam, or to Imams in general, to the administration, to the community. What do you hope to see more in the next decade?
Our masjids are not very welcoming. Our masjids are not really communities. And let's say the majority of masjids. And so I really want to see that inclusion. And if I might bring up a point that I have not touched upon, and that is the relationship between ethnic groups, especially between what we might think of as first-generation immigrant groups and African Americans. The relationship between African Americans and Muslims who have come from overseas, or second generation, their children, has been improving greatly. When I became Muslim, African Americans and other people, there was no relationship. And things over the decades have improved, but they have not reached the ideal of a true relationship. And because African American Muslims are such an important part of the American Muslim community, we need to be of those who reach out, of those who establish relationships. I think, again, being relevant, this helps young adults see the benefit of Islam. They see it as a way to really deal with some of the issues that are bedeviling this society, which is institutional racism. And so we can do a lot better in forging those relationships and being more inclusive. So more welcoming, inclusive, and more activist inshallah, in the issues facing America: environmentalism, again, racism, issues of justice and policing. Masjids don't have to do everything, but they should be, again, a nexus in which those people who are involved in those issues can come and find an audience, the masjid offers a means of organizing people, recruiting people. I'm active in CARE, and CARE can't live without masjids, right? Because so much of the recruitment is done through masjids. So spiritually alive and actively alive in our communities with relevant projects, activities, activism and spirituality. That's what I want to see.
Professor Ihsan, thank you so much. On behalf of the OCIF community and staff, we extend to you our sincerest thanks for taking time out of your day in Ramadan to talk to us, to advise us, for us to learn from you. To all the viewers, thank you so much for joining us today. Ramadan Mubarak once again. Professor, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, bless your work. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spread your knowledge, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.